Hey Amazon Prime members, why pay more for groceries when you can save big on thousands of items at Amazon Fresh? Shop Prime exclusive deals and save up to 50% on weekly grocery favorites. Plus, save 10% on Amazon brands, like our new brand Amazon Savor, 365 by Whole Foods Market, Aplenty, and more. Come back for new deals rotating every week. Don't miss out on savings. Shop Prime exclusive deals at Amazon Fresh. Select varieties.
This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We come to you regularly with brilliant business guests, brilliant private equity guests, as well as trying to make sure we learn something, I learn something, that our audience is entertained some. We're joined today by a brilliant lawyer, but really an all-around brilliant person, David Pivnick. David, aside from being a great lawyer, was valedictorian in his law school class. David, one of the things that I am watching currently in the business world, the professional world, is it seems like we've got the most active Department of Justice that we've had in really a couple decades, as far as I could tell. I mean, they're constantly sort of going after big companies. There seems to be always something going on with Amazon or Google or one of the big companies that they're going after. Plus, they're very busy on mergers and acquisitions. What is your sense of that? How active is it in that in the sort of the bar that you serve in, where you represent big companies, private equity funds in investigations, false claims cases, and so forth? Are you seeing that? Do you feel that, or is that just sort of from a 30,000 view it looks so active?
No, I think that's, first, thanks for having me, Scott. And I think that is an accurate observation. I think there's a variety of reasons for it. Some of it in the world I live in, which is, in that front, largely defending false claims act cases and working entirely on the defense side. I think a big part of it, honestly, is just time lag. The government gets about 700 whistleblower cases that are filed by, key TAM plaintiffs, key TAM relators every single year. And those 700 cases need to be investigated by the DOJ. And there was, frankly, a large slowdown of the DOJ's investigative efforts during the pandemic. And so I think a lot of it right now is there's been a lot of activity because those 700 new relator-driven cases are coming in every year. But there's, frankly, a backlog of cases from 3-4 years ago that DOJ is working through. So in my space, I think it's definitely busier. I think the attorneys in various U.S. attorneys' offices working for the DOJ around the country are very busy and have a lot on their plate. I think bigger picture, there's certainly a more, I'll say, robust amount of enforcement that we see. In the healthcare space, there's a lot of activity and monitoring still in connection with the opioid epidemic, which continues to keep a lot of prosecutors around the country busy on the criminal and civil side. The FTC obviously has made non-competes a focus, and there's obviously a significant amount of antitrust enforcement that's been going on, and I think higher scrutiny on that front, as well as a lot more state laws coming into play. So, yes, in general, I do think it's been fairly active from a government enforcement standpoint over the last couple of years, and I don't know how much of that is a trend that will continue sort of going forward indefinitely versus developments that have come about between the pandemic and other sort of changes in the world day to day, as well as political leanings that are driving some of that.
Yes, no, it's fascinating. So part of it's just a backlog, and a lot of this is the opioid stuff still. I saw a big false claims case and settlement, billions of dollars at stake in an opioid thing the other day. But also it does seem like, I think it's Redicon or the DOJ or the FTC is just a more aggressive take on this stuff. Is that not a fair statement, at least in terms of antitrust and stuff like that?
I think certainly in terms of antitrust, at a minimum, the DOJ is taking a more stringent look and has been fairly active. And I don't know how much that will continue, but I suspect it might for at least the immediately foreseeable future.
Thank you. And take a moment on next year. What are you focused on and excited about for next year? What's in front of the sort of business legal community? What are you excited about? What do you have your eye on for the coming year?
I mean, for me personally, there's a few different significant false claims cases that I'm working on that are, one set for trial next year and one we think will likely get to trial the year after that. And so those are keeping me busy. On a more macro level, this is, we're at a point right now where we are waiting, where I'm monitoring sort of where the DOJ's focus is. And I think what will be interesting, and I don't have it's hard to predict right now, but, depending on how the election goes in November, I think there could be meaningful changes in enforcement priorities, where some of the funding goes and what levels of funding continue at the DOJ. So I think, I'm very interested in how the election shakes out for a variety of reasons, but from an enforcement standpoint and how it might impact the work that I do day to day, as well as, what impacts many of our clients at the firm, I think it'll be interesting where the election shakes out and where DOJ's enforcement priorities may shift or remain depending on those results.
And is your sense that, that if Kamala Harris elected, it'll end up being a continuation of what we have in terms of an increased vigilance and prosecution is over with? Whereas if President Trump is elected, it's a harder call to make in terms of where that goes and what happens going forward on it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think if Kamala Harris is elected, I would expect more of the same. And again, I think there may be some more subtle shifts in focus. And, as some of the backlog on key TAMs gets cleared up, we may see some more minor adjustments, but from a bigger sort of policy-based standpoint, I wouldn't expect major changes from what we're seeing. I think if former President Trump becomes again President Trump, I think it's much harder to predict what his agenda may look like. And obviously, he's spoken a lot, both when he was president before and now, about sort of a smaller government concept in a lot of ways and lower enforcement. I don't know that that's how things will play out, but I think it'll certainly be interesting to monitor.
And I guess two easy questions, is just so, and again, if these are not complex enough for you, just let me know. Can he pardon himself, and who will win, Kamala or Donald? Which of the two of them wins the election? Those are the two easy questions.
Yeah, super easy. I mean, very basic question. I don't know the answer to either, frankly. I think on the first, I suspect if he felt he could have pardoned himself, he would have tried that a few years ago. And I'm not sure what advice he got on it. And I am not sufficiently, I'm not enough of a constitutional scholar to pretend that I know how that will ultimately play out. I am somewhat surprised it wasn't something that was tried a few years ago, and I wouldn't be surprised if President Trump is if he's reelected, if he tries it again. In terms of who's going to win, honestly, I have no idea. A few months ago, both prior to Joe Biden stepping aside as the candidate and shortly thereafter, I thought President Trump was going to almost certainly win. More recently, I thought Kamala had gained a lot of momentum and was looking good, and now I feel some of that momentum has stalled. So it's very hard to tell, and I think a lot of it is going to come down to voter turnout on both sides, frankly, because I think there's a lot of folks who align themselves to the right politically, but are not super excited about voting for Donald Trump and are going to have to decide whether they're willing to do that, whether they're going to stay home, whether they might vote, Democrat for the first time in years, or maybe in some cases in their lives. And I think the same applies, on the left, unlike, in 2020, where I think everyone sort of came together and rallied around Joe Biden. There's a lot of controversial issues, which I'm hoping you don't have a follow-up question on, that are going on right now that I think may impact turnout on the left as well, which, clearly hinders Kamala's chances of getting elected.
No, I think that's a thoughtful analysis. And you had mentioned two things there that I'd like to follow up on. One, you had mentioned that you're not a constitutional scholar. And I think of you as one of the brightest people that I know. Does that mean there are limits to your intellectual capacity and to the subjects that you are an expert on? Are there actual limits? And can we get that on tape?
I will accept that there are and give that to you on tape. That is correct.
Thank you. And then I had another question that I am going to let go for the time being. But I do want to, thank you for indulging me in this discussion about the election. It does actually impact what happens with the Department of Justice and FTC. So I feel it is a fair sort of stepping stone to where we were. But I also think it's fair not to push it too hard and too much of this, due to, among other things, politics and intellectual capacity. I don't want to push you too far.
Yeah, I appreciate you looking out for my intellectual capacity.
I figured that was just the right thing. The right thing to do. In any event, I want to thank you for joining us on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. As those that listen regularly know, our goal is for people to learn something and also to be entertained some. David, who's one of our most listened to guests, literally one of the top 5 most listened to guests that we have on the podcast, is always both interesting, brilliant, and entertaining. So we are so thankful for him joining us on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Hey, Amazon Prime members, why pay more for groceries when you can save big on thousands of items at Amazon Fresh? Shop Prime exclusive deals and save up to 50% on weekly grocery favorites. Plus, save 10% on Amazon brands, like our new brand Amazon Savor, 365 by Whole Foods Market, Aplenty, and more. Come back for new deals rotating every week. Don't miss out on savings. Shop Prime exclusive deals at Amazon Fresh. Select varieties.